Hey Stitchers, well I'm back with my last video that I've promised to do in my little stash series, and that's one about the cottons, different types of cottons that I have in my stash. But before I go into showing you a few of the threads I picked out from my stash, there were just two other things related that I just wanted to talk about briefly. Relatively briefly. The first one was a question that I got asked on one of my videos. I can't remember which one now. I think it was a silks video, and that was from Lucy, and she asked me, how do I decide whether I want to stitch a project in cottons or silks? And I thought that's a really good question. So I've thought about it, and it's actually a really difficult question to answer, because obviously I love stitching in silk, but I also enjoy stitching with cottons. You know, there's nothing wrong with stitching cottons. But usually my decision rests on the project. Most projects I look at on an individual basis, and sometimes the desire to stitch it in silks screams louder to me than my desire to stitch it in cottons. I was just thinking about, for example, the Scarlet Letter sampler that I want to do next year. Now that has a list of DMCs to use, but it also has, you know, the list of Auvert Soie d'Alger silks. And so the sensible half of my brain says, well, you know, stitch it in DMCs, you can get the chart and you can stitch on it straight away, you'll have all the DMCs in your stash, whereas obviously if you want to stitch it in silks, I'll have to, you know, save up my stash money to buy the silks. That's the sensible part of my brain, but then the other side says, oh, just stitch it in silks because you love them. And also it does make a difference if a chart has been charted specifically for a brand of silk that I love using, then I'm automatically kind of drawn to use those silks. There are brands of silk I'm not that fond of. No reason, no particular reason, just my preference. And so sometimes if a chart gives you the option to stitch with those silks versus DMC, I'll either, well, more than likely I'd probably switch it to another brand of silk that I prefer, or I stitch it in cotton. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes if I've just got a chart, say a freebie chart for example, I've shown you a few of the ones that I've done, I've chosen to stitch it in silk not because it's an expensive project or really detailed, but when I've looked at the chart, I've thought about the colours I want to use, and I know that I've got silks in the colours that I want to use in that chart. At that point, I don't really care whether it's cotton or silk. It's more important to me what colours the colours I'm looking for to complete that chart. So sometimes it just comes down to colour choice, what I have in my stash. I know Tara, I think, said that hand dyes are for every day. She was talking about fabrics. I totally agree with that, but I also agree with it when it comes down to hand dyed threads, cotton and silk. Silk is more expensive, we all know that, but if you've got them in your stash, why not use them? Don't save them for a special project. Sometimes I am guilty of that, and I'm trying to come up with ways, which I will talk about at the end of the video, in which I can perhaps use those threads more often in my work. But I just thought that was a really good question from Lucy, because it did make me think why I do things the way that I do, and there's not really, as I say, there's not really any set answer. I don't have a set formula. You know, I will stitch in silks for these type of patterns, and I will only stitch in cottons for those type of patterns. It's more about looking at the project and it sounds stupid, what comes to me when I look at the project. But just some projects I look at and I just think they deserve silk, really, especially if it's a brand of silk that I love. But then the same is true for cottons. If it's in a brand of cotton, you know, hand dyed cotton that I love, then I'll stitch it in cottons. Or sometimes I don't. Sometimes I like sticking with one brand in a project, which sounds daft because I stitch chatelaines and they're all sorts of different brands of thread. But sometimes it's just simpler, I think it's about narrowing down the choice. I've got so many different threads to choose from, sometimes I just like to say, right, I'm just going to pick from my Gloriana silks for this project, or I'm just going to pick from my Jodo Designs threads for this project, which is what I did, if you remember in my kitting up video, with the drawn thread piece, Butterfly Garden. That had for either the cotton and the silk side, because it gave the materials in both types of thread. They were all different types of cottons and all different types of silks, and I was like, oh, I don't want to go rooting through all of my stash looking for the right colour. I'll just narrow it down and say I will choose from my Jodo Designs threads. So sometimes it even comes down to that. Yeah, so no set answer, but thank you for asking that, Lucy, because it did really make me, think a bit more about things. Sometimes I do try and be sensible and just try and stitch using the threads that I have, but it is always a temptation to, add to my silks collection. I don't really find that a difficult thing to do. The next thing I realised that I had failed to mention when talking about hand-dyed fabrics and hand-dyed silks and hand-dyed cottons, as I'm going to talk a bit about today, is colour fastness. It's not something I've talked about because it isn't something that's important to me. But of course, for a lot of you and a lot of stitchers, it is very important that you're able to wash your work when you finished it, which is absolutely fine. As I think I mentioned before, I have a real phobia about washing my work. I don't wash my finished pieces at all, which I know probably horrifies some of you. But the thought of washing it horrifies me. I imagine, colours will run, fabric will shrink, and it will look awful after I put all that work into it. That is the reason why I don't wash my work, is down to my own personal fear. It's got nothing to do with any principle. It probably does make much more sense to wash your work. Obviously, there are some pieces that you want to stitch, say Afghans, for example. Obviously, it's important that that's washable. So yeah, it would be pointless to perhaps stitch it on hand-dyed fabric using hand-dyed threads when it's got to go in the washing machine all the time. So it is important to consider colour fastness in threads and fabric. And the reasons why I take sort of as many steps as I can to make sure that my work, when I finished it, isn't dirty or grubby in any way. Obviously, to my eye, to the naked eye, my work is quite clean. Obviously, on a microscopic level, it's probably absolutely filthy, but then I think if you looked at everything at a microscopic level, you'd probably never ever stay in a hotel room ever again. So for my eye and to my satisfaction, my work is pretty clean, but I know that it is important for a lot of stitchers to be able to wash their work. For me, I don't have any children and I don't have any pets, so I don't have to worry about, grubby little hands and paws getting on my work, just my own grubby hands. So obviously I always make sure that my hands are clean when I start my stitching, and that's one of the reasons why I stitch in a scroll frame, because it means I don't have to, touch my fabric. Makes me sound a bit strange, but it just lessens the chance that it will get dirty in some way, and I don't, eat or drink around my stitching. Don't drink. What I mean is, I don't drink a glass of red wine while I'm stitching. One, because I probably would spill it, and two, I'd probably make so many mistakes that it would never be worth it. So, my advice, don't drink and stitch. It doesn't go together for me anyway. And also, when I've finished stitching a stitching session, I usually cover my piece on my frame with a pillowcase or something, so it avoids sort of gathering dust. And as you've seen, when I'm not stitching something, when it's not on my frame, it gets rolled up again in a poster tube to sort of limit the amount of dirt or dust or whatever could come upon it. So as far as I can, I try and make sure that I, keep my work as clean as possible, because I know I won't wash it. Now, even with DMCs, yes, they are supposed to be colour fast, but as any of us that do laundry on a regular basis know, there is always colours that are notorious for running, like red, for example. So even a DMC red, if I was stitching an Afghan that I knew would need to be washed, even I would, pre-rinse red and sort of darker threads just in case. But obviously hand-dyed fabrics, as I think Picture This Plus might say that they're colour fast, but to be honest, I wouldn't take that chance. I know a lot of dyers do try as much as they possibly can to make their fabrics as colour fast as possible, but they don't they can't guarantee it. So for most stitchers who use hand-dyed fabrics, they're okay with that. But of course, then if you're a stitcher that does feel the need to wash your work afterwards, then that kind of limits your ability to use hand-dyed fabrics, which is a shame. The same is true with hand-dyed threads. Most of the ones I'll show you today, some of them do say they're colour fast, but they still say, you know, be careful with reds and darker colours. So they might say they're colour fast to the best of their knowledge, but you don't want to run that risk. If you spend time stitching a design with beautiful threads, you do not then want the colours to run, because that would be horrible. So to avoid that, a lot of stitchers pre-rinse their threads. Personally, again, this is just my very personal opinion, I've never done that. I don't wash my work, so it's not a step that I need to take. But I just think if you spent that money on hand-dyed threads, why do you want to rinse as much dye out of them as possible? But again, you know, I don't have an issue with needing to wash my work, and I fully understand that some stitchers find, you know, it's really important that you wash your work. I'm not knocking stitchers that wash their work at all, because I'm sure I'm in the minority in not washing my work. In fact, I'm pretty sure I am in the minority. It's just my personal thing. And again, for that reason, with hand-dyed silks and cottons, I can think of one stitcher, a chatelaine stitcher in particular, a gentleman actually, as it happens, and he stitches in hand. So it's very important for him that he, not necessarily because his hands are dirty, but because he handles the fabric a lot. Obviously you're getting, you know, your oils and things, skin oils and that on the work. He finds it's very important for him to wash his work, and for that very reason he chooses only to use DMC threads to stitch his chatelaines, because it means that once he's done all his stitching, he can give, you know, his chatelaine a little bath, and before he does the beading, so he knows his fabric is clean. So again, possibly, I don't know, stitchers that stitch in hand might find feel more of a need to wash their work. And I think, you know, for stitchers out there that stitch in hand, I think it's amazing. I really wish I could do it. I know a few of you stitch in hand. I know Mackenzie does, and I think that's just such a great thing to be able to do, to just, you know, really pare down your stitching in a way, just to be able to pick up a piece of fabric and get your needle, and there you are. You don't have to faff about with hoops and moving them and stands and all that type of thing. So I think it's really great to be able to stitch in hand, and it just cuts out so much stuff you don't need really. But yeah, so of course if you're that type of stitcher, then you need to wash your work, and that's important to you. So as much as I love hand-dyed fabrics and threads, I can completely see why some of you don't want to use them. It makes sense for the style, for the way that you stitch. For the way that I stitch, I don't wash my work, so that's why, you know, I don't have a problem with using them. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention colour fastness, because I know it is important for a lot of you. And as I show you a few of the threads, I'll show you the labels, so you can see what they say about colour fastness. But I'd realised that I'd negated to say anything about it, and I know that it's important, and it does put people off who need to wash their work from using those threads. Anyway, so that's that. So I've done my due diligence in mentioning colour fastness. Cottons. I don't have anything, any words of wisdom about cottons. We all use them. You know what I'm talking about. There's no mystery. The only thing that can be different between some cottons, obviously, is the thickness. I've got some cotton pearl type threads that I'll show you, but that's the same for silk. You can get different thicknesses of silk, as I showed you in my silks video. As far as types of cotton go, obviously, as I've said before, DMC goes through a mercerization process. So some hand-dyed threads are actually dyed on using white DMC. So that's the base thread that's used to dye those cottons. But then you get others like Gentle Art Sampler threads, which I think are just dyed straight up Egyptian cotton, which is why Weeks Dye Works, Gentle Art Sampler threads, and Crescent Colours, Colourworks, whatever they're called now, That's why they're more of a matte thread. When you look at them, there's no sort of sheen or shine to them, and that's what makes them quite suitable for those sort of vintage, antique, prim style of designs. You know, they're quite good for that. Which isn't to say that they don't come in bright colours, as a lot of you who stitch Frosted Pumpkin stitchery charts know. I mean, it's not like they only come in shades of brown and grey. You get pink and bright green and all sorts of things, but it's just they give that sort of more matte appearance because they don't have that sheen to them. But that's really all I've got to say about cottons. It's not, you know, you all know that. So basically this video is just me showing you pretty threads, because that's about all I could come up with to do for it. But maybe you might here, you know, see some different threads that you've not heard of or something, I don't know. But it's just to give you a chance to see the type of things that I have in my stash and the type of things I use regularly in my stitching. So you've seen my Jojo Designs cottons, you know I have loads of them, so I'm not going to show you any more of those. You know I have lots of Gentle Art sampler threads, Weeks Dye Works, Crescent Colours, those type of cottons. I'm not going to show you those. All I will show you is I, again, rifled through my finished archives and I found a couple of pieces that I'd use Gentle Art sampler threads in, so I just thought, you know, just to give you something to look at rather than keep listening to me. Here's some of those. So this one is by, why did I not double check this? I think it's Little House Needleworks, not Country Cottage Needleworks. It's one or the other. I know that Aisha's got this one. I remember her doing a video and sharing it, but it's called Summer Splendour. And originally it was charted for Crescent Colours, or Colourworks, but I changed it all to Gentle Art sampler threads because those were the colours that I had. I wanted to stitch from stash and I had more appropriate colours in that brand of thread than I did in Crescent Colours. So that's why I changed it. It's not because I don't like Crescent Colours, it's just what I had in my stash really. Because it was only a small, so you know, I didn't feel the need to go out and buy the Crescent Colours just for that when I knew I had pretty suitable ones in my stash already. So it's stitched on 28 count biscuit linen. So again, you know, Gentle Art sampler threads, we all know them. They offer, you know, a little bit of variegation here and there. Just makes it a bit different, gives it that kind of nice sort of homespun effect. And the other one that I stitched in Gentle Art sampler threads, this is a Lizzie Kate design. I can't remember what it's called now. Probably Plank Kindness, I expect. I've since given the chart away to another stitcher. But again, you know, you can see there the slight variegation in the threads that we all know when we use Gentle Art sampler threads. So I just thought I'd show you those because you haven't seen them. But yeah, so I'm not going to talk about those. Other threads that I have in my cottons that I have in my stash, which I haven't pulled, different brands I've got. I include, I've got some Carrie's Creations, I've got some silks, Carrie's Creations silks as well, but I've got Carrie's Creations cottons, I've got Valdani cottons. Again, they're kind of similar, probably slightly more variegated, but the same sort of tones and use as sort of Gentle Art sampler threads. That's how I think of them in my mind. The types of patterns that I would use Gentle Art sampler threads for, I would use Valdani threads for. I've got some 6-stranded sweets, which obviously aren't in production anymore. And what else do I have? I have some, Necessities Ink, I think, is what they've now been incorporated into Threadworks thread. Threadworks cottons are actually one of the brands that I don't have in my stash. I would very much like to have at least, you know, a few of every sort of brand of silk and cotton out there, but you know, that's just my little thing because I just like to collect threads. As you know, I'm a thread junkie, I can't help it. Yeah, so those are some others, but I've just got a few, she says, let's see, 1, 2, 3 brands and different ones within those brands to show you now, just, you know, just so you know that they're out there really. So the first little lot I have, just randomly picked out, are Dragon Floss cottons. They're obviously made, well not necessarily obviously, you might not know, they're made by, or dyed by Pole Stitches, the same Jo who dyes the lovely Pole Stitches fabric. They also have a line of hand-dyed cottons, and here's just, you know, random selection I picked. These ones here, I picked them out because they're all limited editions, and they're all sort of lovely summery colours. You know, they've got this, you know, slight variegations to each of them, but you can probably tell by their names. That's Fat Squirrel. Yes, Long Island Iced Tea. They're all actually named after cocktails, which is why they look fairly summery. But the funny thing is that they all have on the back, so this is Long Island, oops, sorry, I should get the hang of this by now, Long Island Iced Tea, and then, well, I keep saying iced tea because that's what I call it if I drink it, Long Island tea. And on the back they have the little recipe for the cocktail, just in case you needed to know. So yeah, those are examples of you know, Dragon Floss, so just your standard, you know, hand-dyed cottons really. That's the thing with threads, you know, you get different brands, but ultimately, I mean, there are only so many colours that you can come up with. So it's not like they're the same, I guess it's just what you prefer really. And here's just a normal, not a limited edition necessarily, but it's purple, so obviously I had to pick it out and show it to you, and that one's called Romance. But yeah, you can get those on the Pole Stitches. I mean, they sell all sorts of threads, but they obviously also sell their own hand-dyed Dragon Floss threads. You can buy them. So-and-so used to sell them, but I don't think they do now. They, I think, if I remember rightly, they had a little half-price sale of Dragon Floss, which makes me think that they no longer sell it. They were selling them at half price to get rid of their stock. So obviously I took advantage of that, you know, half price threads, what you can do. Yep, so Pole Stitches, that's one brand of hand-dyed thread that I have in my stash. Now I can't remember if I don't know if I said, did I say they're 6-stranded floss, same as DMC, and 5-metre strands, 5-metre skeins ordinarily. Now I don't know if I can't remember if I mentioned it before, but I am a bit of a Francophile. I love things French, all things French. If anything's got French writing on it or French themed, then I am quite drawn to stitch it. And I have some hand-dyed threads by a French dyer. I couldn't resist them because obviously they've all got French names, and you know I couldn't resist really. So these are Annick Abrial threads. Again, they are 6-stranded, and I think these are 8 meters. And you'll see on these, I don't think the Dragon Floss doesn't mention anything about colour fastness, but on these ones you'll see that it does actually say that you can wash them at 40 degrees. So, you know, me personally, I would take that with a pinch of salt, and if I felt the need to wash my work, I would pre-rinse the threads just to make sure, especially if they were darker threads. But anyway, so here are a few of these that I have in my stash. There are quite a few actually hand dyers dotted all around the world, you know, one woman or one person, who am I to say whether it's a man or a woman, you know, businesses, little small businesses of dyers, you know, dyeing their own fabrics and threads, and I just think that's really interesting. I know there are threads out there that I really want to. I've been looking at her website and Etsy shop for ages, and I really should just buy some. A Hungarian, I think I'm right in saying, Nina, her name is Nina's Thread. She's just on Instagram now, as well as her blog and Etsy shop. Obviously I'll link to everything, I'll try and remember that I'm talking about. Her threads are beautiful, and I love the names of them. I find that I am, as well as being drawn to purple, threads have interesting names. I want to buy them. Oh, I don't know why. Doesn't make any sense, does it? So here are these, the Annick Abrial floss that I was talking about. They've all got, you know, lovely French names. Reflect de Violette. I love this one. It's really pretty. Jardin d'Adélis. This one is Horizon d'été. So appropriately named. Summer. It's very summery looking. Blue sea. Not that sea is in the name, but you know, it's what it makes me think of when I think of summer and blue sky and sea. This one, Pearl de Lila, and Voie Lactée, purpley. They're not coming up very well on the camera, but yeah, there's some really nice. I've got quite a few of these, and obviously these ones I haven't used. Shame on me, but yeah, they're just something about the variegation in them and the different colours. I mean, obviously I've got a lot of variegated threads. Some are brighter and bolder than others, but these are quite usable, you know. They'd fit in with a lot of different projects. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention those because they're a bit different. I love I love looking at French stitching, cross-stitching sites, and I love French patterns. So like Jardin Privé, they actually had, I've got it, they did a freebie design, like a stitch along, called, it's in French, but it's called Positive Thoughts. I've seen somebody on YouTube stitch it. I can't remember which YouTube stitcher it was, but it was a really great chart because not only was it free, but you could also get the little sayings. It was charted for English, it was charted for French, I think it was charted for German, Italian, so you could stitch it in lots of different languages, which I thought was really good. Obviously I downloaded the English, but I also downloaded the French version, so I, at some point, would like to stitch the French version. But anyway, I digress. I'm supposed to be talking about cottons, not my obsession with all things French. Yeah, so those are Anna Gabriel floss. Now when I did the silks video, I mentioned obviously Dinky Dye Silks, how much I love using their silks, and I also love using their cottons. I don't have as many cottons, Dinky Dye's cottons, as I do silks, but I did manage to pick out a matching pair of cotton and silk. I don't think with this one in particular, you can, the difference in the colours probably won't pick up on the iPad very well, but we'll have a look. As I said, get these out. This is Daydream, I believe, yes. Now here's the cotton. There you go. Yeah, these ones don't say anything about colour fastness, but again, you know, I just wouldn't trust a thread not to run. I would pre-rinse it. Some people, you can pre-rinse them in cold water, and some people use vinegar and different things to try and set the dyes in them, but like I say, I am not an expert on the subject of rinsing threads, because I don't do it. But anyway, this is Daydream, and that's the cotton, and this is the silk. There is a slight difference in the colours. You can see there the blue is slightly more muted than the cotton, and that's normally what I've found anyway. The difference between cotton and silk when you're using the same dyes is the colours on the silk slight. It's not that they're not bright, they're just, I can't really describe it, they're just slightly more muted. They don't pick up the colour in the same way. So yeah, those are those. Obviously, straight away you can feel the difference between the cotton and the silk. No, you don't want me to watch me stroke threads, that's just weird. But yeah, so I thought I'd show you that. Not that it necessarily comes out quite so well. And obviously I've got different ones here. Lots of these are pink for some reason. So that one's Wild Cherry. Then we've got Rosella. Again, all of these are obviously available in silk as well. The difference in price between, in the UK anyway, I didn't look at the American this time, because I wasn't really going to talk about prices, but the difference in price between a skein of cotton and a skein of silk in the UK is about £1. So, you know, these are good cottons to get. They're quite, I think they're, must be about £1.80 or so on sewing, so I can't remember now off the top of my head, but yeah, that's the sort of price they are. That one's Tutti Frutti. And I had to try and dig out from the archives again a pattern, a chart that I'd used just Dinky Dye's cotton for, and here is an example. This is from a freebie from a blog. It's a little small. It's called Marshmallow. I'll try and link to the blog, because the blog, it's Olga Maxton is the blog, a Russian blog I think, but she designed all her own charts and things, and there's some lovely freebies on there with all sorts of specialty stitches. But this is one colour of Dinky Dye's cotton, so you can see the effect of using, you know, just one colour of variegated thread there. What stitches have we got? We've got round roads and eyelets and star eyelets and things like that in that one. But yeah, the little delicate beads. But the colour that I used, this one, number 2, which is Purple Haze. So you can see how well, you know, the variegation comes out just using one colour. And that's, I mean, a lot of people have asked me in comments and things as I've done my videos, you know, what on earth do you use all these threads for? Well, aside from them looking pretty in my stash, I just, you know, you can use hand-dyed threads on anything. You can substitute them for a solid colour, you know, a DMC, if you think it will add something to the design, or these sort of type of designs, little smalls and things, just use one colour and one colour of thread just for the whole design. I've talked about that I use them in black work, obviously the disadvantage with using a variegated thread in for black work is not necessarily so much matching the colours. That kind of works itself out in most cases, but obviously you can't use necessarily the Holbein or double running stitch that I like to use for black work, because then your colours definitely won't match up. If you've missed every other stitch and then you go back, there won't be that lovely sort of gentle variegation of the thread as you go round in your stitching. But there's so many things you can use these threads for. You know, the world is your oyster. And again, I don't have a problem changing threads. I don't have a problem mixing silk and cottons in the same piece. I stitch chatelaines. That's what you're doing in a piece like that. So I don't have any issues that way. But I know, some stitches, it's important that they use one type of floss, or they don't like changing colours and things, and that's absolutely fine. There's cross stitch. I think initially some people, when they start cross stitching, they don't know all the different things that are available, and they just think it's very sort of narrow, that you have to do it this way. But there are so many choices and so many options that each of us can find something different that we love about stitching that makes what we do more enjoyable for us. And as you know, and as I've already said, one of those things is, using colour and texture and things. I like to do that in my stitching, using different threads. To other people, it's just the joy of completing a really complicated piece, or the joy of finishing something, finishing it properly, making something out of it. Those things aren't quite so important to me. I'm more of a process stitcher than I am a product stitcher. I have plenty of finishes, but they all sit in a drawer waiting for me to do something with them. But I don't find that important. Personally, for me, for some of you, it is important that you actually stitch a piece and you have a purpose in mind for it. And that's what's great about stitching, is that we all sort of do the same thing, but we come at it from different angles. But anyway, I've gone off on a tangent again, haven't I? Where was I? I was talking about Dinky Dye's cottons. Yeah, Dinky Dye's cottons, great. Next threads will be Caron threads. I mentioned in my silks video, I love Caron threads. I love their water lily silks, but I also really, really love their wildflower cotton threads. And as I was preparing for this video and going through my stash, I realised that I had quite a lot more wildflower threads than I actually thought. I'd forgotten how many I had. So I've got a few of those to show you. As I said in my silks video, water lilies, wildflowers and watercolours all dyed in the same colours across the range, but of course they use different base materials. So your water lilies are your silks, your wildflowers are cottons, and as are watercolours. They're just different thicknesses. So I'll show you some water lilies, and despite what I said in my silks video, I do also have some matching pairs of silks and of water lilies and wildflowers, so you can see the difference, how the dye takes the silk and the cotton differently. Wildflowers, you can get all the wildflowers I've got are variegated, but you can get wildflowers in just solid colours, just like you can the Soie Cristal Caron threads are the solid colours of silk. The water lilies are the variegated silks that they sell. But anyway, wildflowers I use for cross stitching and stitching, but I also use them in hardang, obviously, as I showed you. I've got another piece. I don't think I showed you properly the particular piece of hardang I'm going to show you. I'm trying to come up with different things that I finished to show you, to illustrate points. But here we go. Here is this is the water lilies. This is the silk. Celadon is the colour, number 67. And this is the same, number 67, Celadon, but this time wildflowers, which is cotton. So you can see how, it's exactly the same colours, the same dye, but just how different the silk takes it to the cotton. So to me, the yellow, sort of lighter green, stand out much more in the silk than they do in the cotton. Again, you can see, if I show you there, the label, it does say the dyes are colour fast, but again, to be sure to be careful with reds and dark colours. So again, it is difficult if you do want to wash your work using these type of threads. But but Wildflowers comes in, I think it's a 33 metre skein. Yeah, 33 metre skein, and you use it as it comes off the skein. So it's single, it's, you know, not stranded, it is one single thread, and it's about equivalent to a pearl number 8, sort of. It's sort of that thickness. I've got a little comparison to show you in a minute of all the different thicknesses of pearl threads. But yeah, so that's Wildflowers. That's what they look like. I love them. I have, like I said, I have way more of them than I thought I did. Just another little comparison again between a silk and the cotton. This is Cedar this time, number 136, and again it'll be the same number, thread number and colour, but in the Wildflowers. So I don't know, it's not really, you can sort of see there again. To me, the Wildflowers, the cotton skein, shows the colours much clearer, much brighter, whereas the silk is more muted. You can see the different tones in it, but it's not quite as obvious as the cotton. So yeah, I love using Wildflowers. I've just got a few more just to show you the sort of range of colours. This one's Blossom, number 42. That's a very pretty colour. Lots of lovely aquas and pinks in that one. And what else? Oh, I love this one. You must get fed up with me saying this every time I look at threads. Oh, I love that one. I love that one. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't have it in my stash, would I? This one's Tiffany Rose. You can probably tell why I like the colours on that one. Purples, sort of jewel tones, really. There's not any blue. Oh, there is a little bit of blue in it, actually. Yeah, that one's very pretty. And then I've got bright ones. This one's Marigold. And lovely sort of orangey autumn, makes me think of autumn, that one, autumn colours. And I've got a really, this looks like a strange colour combination, but this one's Yellow Fever, I think, yep. But just really different colours together. They are coming up quite true to life on the iPad, which I'm surprised about. And this one, lastly, is Painted Desert. So, you know, all pretty. Sorry, this is turning into a look at these pretty threads video now. I'm not really offering you any useful information other than enabling you. Yeah, so Wildflowers, I just love the range of the colours, really. And the fact that you can match the silks and you can buy matching pairs, that appeals to me as well. You can match them up. Now, I think I showed you very briefly in my Stitching Journey video, I think it was, of the matching. I don't have many watercolours, which are the sort of equivalent to pearl number 5 threads. I've only got 2 of those. Shocking, I know, I've only got 2 of one type of thread, but I have stacks of solid DMC pearls number 5, so I don't really need fancy pearls. But yeah, so I've got Apple Blossom, and this is the matching. I mean, these are cotton as well. Let me just show you the floss label. Again, you'll see the numbers are the same, 237 Apple Blossom. But these ones are different. They're only 9 metre, I think they're 9 metre skeins. It doesn't say on here. Oh, yes it does. Muppet. Yeah, you'll see that they're 9 metre skeins. But the difference with these ones are that you don't use them as they come off the skein like you do with Wildflowers. Let me look at this. Ah, this one's better. You can see they actually split into three strands. So one strand is the equivalent to number 5 pearl-ish. So yeah, well, I mean, you can do what you like, but I wouldn't necessarily attempt to stitch with a thread that is that thick. Watercolours are meant to be, they are stranded, they are meant to be divided into 3 like that. So yeah, that darker colour is Geranium, and there's again, the comparison. They're both cottons, but there's the Wildflowers, there's the watercolours. But I am quite tempted to get some more matching matching watercolours, because I do want to do a bit more hardhanger. But what I was going to show you, I don't think I've shown you this one. This again is another Mabel Figworthy design, stitched using all 4 of those threads. Getting all my threads mixed up here now. Yep, so using the 2 shades of watercolours and the 2 shades of wildflowers, and it's called Cross My Heart, I think. I did write it down because I knew I probably wouldn't remember. Yeah, Cross My Heart. This is by Mabel Figworthy again. So you can see, just using those 2 colours of variegated pearls, the nice effect that it has. So these stitches here would be stitched in the watercolours, they're much thicker, and then the cloister blocks here would have been stitched in the wildflowers with the finer, a finer thickness. So number 5's equivalent and number 8's, and the filling stitches. For what are the filling stitches? They would be number 8's as well. These stitches here are sort of rice stitch, a version of rice stitch, and they were stitched in the number 5 equivalent, the watercolour. So you can use, although they're thicker, you can use them to get different textures. And then these little stitches here, they were done in wildflowers. So yeah, that's just one there, just to illustrate the effect that the threads give when you stitch with them. I think they're very pretty. But then I would say that, wouldn't I? What else do I have to say about those? Yeah, it was quite strange. A couple of years ago, the price jumped quite a bit with, it's probably the price of cotton, it does it every so often, thread prices rise. These used to be, I had to look back in my little records, you used to be able to, on So&So, get a skein of wildflowers for £2.54, but then they jumped in price a couple of years ago and they're now £3.78 for a skein of that. And same with the watercolours. The watercolours used to be £2.65 and now they're £4.05, so they've gone up quite a bit in price. But I have been very lucky with eBay auctions, which is where quite a proportion of my wildflower stash has come from, so I'm quite pleased about that. But I do find I'm not too bad. I like things to match and I like matching sets, and I do have particular threads that I am drawn to collecting, but only if I see them on sale or up on an eBay auction. I don't sort of randomly buy threads at full price. I will buy them if they're needed in a chart. As I said at the outset of the video, I am drawn to do charts. If a chart uses a certain thread, ones that I collect, ones that are my favourites, then I am drawn to use it just so that I can add some more of that brand of thread to my collection. But I don't just randomly buy threads at full price for no reason. I do try and feed my thread addiction through eBay and things like that. That's not always true, but for the most part, a lot of my thread stash has come from eBay. I was going to show you just a little comparison. I mean, I know plenty of you out there probably do hardhanger and you know this, but just for, any new stitchers that might be watching and are just wondering how these threads compare to DMC, I've done a little swatch of them here. So here, that fine one at the end, that's just a strand. These ones obviously are all just plain white DMC. This one is a single strand of DMC, ordinary, of 6-stranded, a single strand. Then you've got number 12 pearl, then you've got number 8 pearl, and then you've got number 5 pearl, which is the thickest. And then at the end here, that is a strand of watercolours, a single strand, and that is a single strand of wildflowers. So you can see the different thicknesses of the thread there, how they compare to the stranded single strand of DMC. So with the wildflowers, for example, if you wanted to cross stitch with them, which I do, I use them in all different patterns, but they're often used in chatelaines as well. One strand of this is like the equivalent to 2 strands of DMC, it's a bit thicker. As I've said in the past, I do find these sort of pearl threads very good for certain speciality stitches. I know you've seen this before, but I just wanted to show it again in this context that we're talking about. I did use quite a bit of Wildflowers thread in this one. I used Wildflowers for these Lazy Daisy flowers. Now I know I've said before that I hate any type of looped stitch. I thought I'd better explain what I mean by loop stitch, because it's probably not a term, you know, professional cross stitchers or, you know, stitchers use. It's my own little name for them. When I'm talking about loop stitches, I'm kind of referring to the types of stitches where you do more work on the front without piercing, when I say piercing the fabric, without going through the fabric. You're either weaving threads on top of the fabric, or basically the type of stitches that when you look at the back of a piece you cannot work out what's gone on in the front. There are certain speciality stitches like eyelets, for example. On the back to the front they look practically the same, so when you look at the back of a piece of work you can think, oh yeah, that's an eyelet. I'm not going to show you the back of this because it's a mess, but when I talk about loop stitches I'm talking about the type of stitches where you're just looking at them. When you look at the front there's lots going on, you can see all the different shapes. When you look at the back there's hardly anything there because all the work's gone on the front of your piece. Basically it's stitches where your tension really matters, and that's where I have a problem with them. It's trying to get all of those, I mean I've done quite well for me there, it's getting all of these little loops perfect, each the same thickness and width. That's what drives me insane with those type of stitches. When you're just putting, like say when you're doing a cross stitch, it's quite easy to get your tension right because you're using the holes in the fabric to guide you. Loop stitches, yes, you do use the holes in the fabric, but a lot of the time you're weaving through other stitches, and there's a few of those type of stitches in here. I can't remember the name, but I do remember having a nightmare with stitching the little stitches on this owl's chest. These ones here, I think they're oyster stitches, I can't remember now, but they're loop stitches. I know it's not showing up on the camera, but there's a lot of little loops, what I call loop stitches. Again, it's not the proper name for them, but all the work is done on the front. You know, you're looping the thread on the front and then just stitching, putting 1 or 2 stitches actually in the fabric, but it looks like a lot more when you look at it. But anyway, I'm digressing again. So here's an example. This little mouse here, stitched in a Rhodes, octagonal Rhodes. That's done in Gentle Art Sampler Thread 1 strand. Whereas this one here, I stitched in just straight DMC Pearl number 8. So I like the fact that when I use different thicknesses of cotton, or silk, different thicknesses of thread, I like the texture that it gives to a piece. So, you know, that mouse is just chunkier, you know. I just like the difference in the texture. And again, these little green shoots here, they were stitched in emerald, watercolours, Wildflowers. Again, you know, they're just straight stitches, but they're easier to, when you want a bit of a thicker thread, they're just easier to control, because obviously when you're working with 2 strands, you want them to lie parallel. You know, I don't think I've mentioned it, but in all my cross stitches and tent stitches, I railroad my stitches so that the 2 strands lie parallel to each other, so they're flatter, because it helps to keep your stitching, make your stitching a bit neater, and stops, you know, threads from twisting as they naturally do when you're stitching. It's just what happens. But obviously if you're using a single strand of a thicker thread, you don't have to worry about taming 2 strands. So that's why I chose for those straight stitches, for those little plants, to use a pearl thread, just to give a bit of different texture and just to make it neater for those threads to lie straight. These little star, I don't know what they are, like little, oh no, they're Jessicas, they're star Jessicas, star-shaped Jessicas. They're stitched in number 12 Dinky Dye's Silk Pearl. Again, it just makes it a bit thicker and a lot easier to deal with than using 2 strands. 2 strands would be thicker, would give the thicker look, but it would be a bit of a nightmare to keep the threads under control. Where else have I used pearl threads? Wildflowers are all of this, the flower petals, they're all wildflower threads. Same with the stems here, again that's emerald wildflower thread. And over this side here I just use an ordinary DMC pearl number 8 pearl, to stitch the sort of branches in that one. So I mean that's the reason why I like mixing up my thicknesses of thread, just to give a bit of different texture, just to make it a bit more interesting for me to stitch really, and also to cut down on obsessing over how my stitches look, because sometimes I find doing specialty stitches in a pearl thread just looks a bit neater. So I think that's all I have to say. Look, still at 50 minutes. I didn't think I had much to say. I didn't really have much to say. I had more to show than I had to say today. Apart from my box of pearls. In this box, let me show it to you like this. Yeah, are all my pearl threads. There's a lot in there. Nothing very exciting. I've got some hand-dyed number 5 pearls. They're Garibaldi pearls. They're quite pretty. But all the rest of these are DMC. Now in this box, I don't know how many pearls there are, a lot of pearls. This entire box, the contents of, I bought in various different lots from eBay from the same seller. They were obviously having a clear out of their pearl threads. But this entire box of thread, I haven't counted, but I paid about 20 quid for all these pearls. So they worked out about, I don't know, 15, 20p a skein, rather than the sort of £1 and upwards you'd pay in the shop. Funny thing with pearl threads, for me, this is my thing, just randomly picking these variegated ones out. I don't particularly, no reason, just me being fussy and probably a thread snob. I don't use DMC variegated stranded cotton, probably because I've got plenty of other variegated threads that I prefer, but I love using them in pearls. The DMC, I've got DMC and Anchor, all of these are variegated variations, yeah, colour variations, all different ones. Obviously there's a lot of, I'm not showing these very well, all different, you know, got reds and pastels, greens, darker greens, pinks, and obviously purple and blues. I really love using these in pearl threads, but I don't like using the stranded cottons. Nothing wrong with the cotton, I just obviously think the colours are boring compared to what I have in my stash, but I really like using them, as I've shown you, in hardanger and things. Do you really want to see how many I've got in here? This is just one handful. Yeah, see, this is why I should do more hardanger, because I have tons of the thread I need to do it. I've got no excuse. I've got like every sort of range of colours in there, and that's just, you know, one handful. There's plenty more in here. And I've also got, so those are number 5s. These here, number 5 pearls. And then in this type of form, I've got number 8 pearls. Oops. So I've just got, you know, loads. You don't want to see all that. But obviously the best colours you can get in pearl, you know, ones that are essential to most stitchers, any stitchers out there that do hardanger, obviously white. So you can buy them. You can buy number 8s, I think. No, do they only come in balls? I can't remember. But you can buy number 5 white in balls, not just skeins like that. So yeah, I got lots of these again because somebody on eBay was selling, like, no joke, about 5 balls of pearl threads, 5 for like 50p or something stupid. I did do very well in that auction, and that's where I've got all my pearl stash from. So that's how yes, I do have lots of threads in my stash. That has become increasingly apparent as I've been doing these videos. I've discovered threads that I'd forgotten about or just hadn't sort of logged in my memory that I had. But a lot of it has come from just being savvy on eBay, basically, and knowing what I want, what I will use, and understanding about threads and fabrics in general, really. Yeah, so that's my, you know, if anybody wants any, you know, skein of number 5 pearl, I think I've got plenty to keep us all going. Yeah, so that's that really. So as I said, as I was just saying, doing these videos has made me realise that I have a lot of thread. I mean, I knew I had a lot of thread, but I kind of forgotten how much I had. So I was thinking about this and what I could do about this situation. And I've been inspired by two of my fellow cross-stitch bloggers on FlossTube, as we like to call it now. But as much as I love them as cross-stitchers, and I love their stitching, I have actually been watching the other side of their vlogging life. And I'm talking about Mackenzie at The Lovely Array and Sticky Stitch Aish, except she's not Sticky Stitch for this, she's MS Goddess in Training, the same as her Instagram username. And you may or may not know, be aware, that as well as talking about cross stitch on YouTube, they also talk about makeup and beauty stuff. And I've been watching their makeup videos, which has been really fun, and both of you, I've really enjoyed watching your makeup videos, which I find hilarious personally for me, because as you can see, I'm rubbish with makeup. I don't know what I'm doing with it. But I loved watching their videos because they were so excited and, you know, really enthusiastic, just like they are in their cross-stitch videos, to be honest, exactly the same, but talking about makeup. And I just found it really interesting and really fun. But the thing that has inspired me is both of them are taking part in a challenge that quite a lot of beauty bloggers and vloggers are taking part in. And it's called Project Pan. Basically, it boils down to picking out items in your makeup stash that you want to sort of use up, and you can either use just those products every day until they run out, which I think would be terrible if you really hated them, or, you know, basically that's what it boils down to: picking out from your makeup stash items, put to one side and use them as much as you can until they're empty, until they reach pan. And I've just found that really inspiring, and although, like I say, I'm not a makeup person, I thought I'm sure I could somehow work this into a little challenge for myself personally, because basically whatever you stash, whether it's makeup, whether it's threads, whether it's fabric, whether it's yarn, whether it's your paper crafter, scrapbooker, you've got tons of stamps, tons of, you know, paper stacks and things like that. Any of us that have a stash know of anything that when you use it, you use your stash, but you always reach for your favourites and you forget about other things that you have in your stash. You don't use them, you just keep them because they're pretty and you like collecting them and things. And this is a problem that all of us that stash anything have. You always reach for your favourites, you don't look at other things that perhaps you've got in there. So I've been inspired by Mackenzie and Aish to try and come up with some sort of way of sort of applying those principles of Project Pan to my thread collection. Now, I did come up with a name for this, but then I realised it's probably not conducive to have that on YouTube, because it might come up with some very strange things in a search on YouTube. So I'm going to have to try and come up with a name for this challenge. But I'm kind of thinking along the ideas of picking random skeins of floss, silk or cotton, a mixture of both maybe, from my stash, and putting them to one side and giving myself the challenge each month maybe, or something. I've not really worked out the details yet, it's just kind of an idea that's brewing. Put those threads to one side and really try and use them in a project that month, obviously a little small. I'm thinking this also might work well in combination with all the freebie charts, like the little smalls that I collect from different designers and bloggers, you know, on the internet. I could stitch those little charts and I'm not using sort of the Project Pan thing to completely use the whole skein of thread, but just inspiration it's given me is to just use the things in my stash that are currently, you know, just sitting there really. I love all the threads I've got in my stash, they're all very pretty, but I always reach for the same ones a lot of the time, the same sort of colours. And I think it would just be a good way to not necessarily stretch myself in my stitching, but be sort of more inspired by my thread collection, because I may well find a thread that I've sort of been overlooking, but actually when it stitches up it looks amazing, in just the same way that some of those you know, people in their Project Pan pick up an item from their makeup stash, use it and discover, oh my goodness, you know, this is an amazing shade of, you know, eyeshadow, lipstick, whatever. I wish I'd sort of put it into my you know, make up rotation sooner. So that's kind of a little idea I've got brewing at the moment. If you've got any sort of, if you can think of, I hope you can see what I'm getting at with this sort of little challenge. If you've got any sort of other suggestions that you can think of, other ways that I could use a little challenge that I could set myself to do with my thread collection, I'd be really interested. I know I've kind of sort of discussed the idea a little bit with Aish. She thought it was hysterical what I wanted to call this little challenge, but I'm not going to say it. She'll probably write it in the comments now in big letters. But anyway, but I just want to try and, you know, use those threads, because like I said at the beginning, there's no point having them. I mean, I like collecting them and they all look very pretty, but it'd be nice to use them in something. And also maybe with these little smalls that I'm planning on using them for, another element of the challenge would be to actually finish the small. So make it into an ornament, make it into flat fold, make it into something. That would be another really good way of incorporating things that I want to do more of. So that's another thought. But if you've got any suggestions on that subject, please put them in the comments. So here we go. Look, an hour I've talked, not really mentioned anything interesting whatsoever. So you've sat hopefully stitching while I've been talking to you. I haven't really said anything very enlightening, other than I have lots of threads, but you already knew that. So that's that. So this is the last of my videos. Not forever. I wouldn't do that to you. But now I'm probably only going to do videos once a month to do my updates. And if anybody's doing a tag or wants me to do something, then obviously I will try and take part where I can. But my next video probably won't be till the end of August, beginning of September. As I mentioned, I'm going to be having a giveaway, so please keep your eyes peeled for that. For all my subscribers, I'll be having a Jodie Designs giveaway, as I mentioned in my whips video. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say now. I have put my views on YouTube about my stitching, so now it's just going to be me and what I get up to every month in my stitching and stashing exploits. So I hope you found my videos useful in some way. If you told me 2 months ago that I would be putting up 17 videos about cross stitching on YouTube and that the average time of them would be like an hour, I would have just laughed. So I can't actually believe that I've done it and that I've talked so much. But you all seem to, as much as you all laugh at me for making these long videos, you all seem to, well, you say you like them, I don't know. I'm not stupid enough to think that the fact that my videos have got like 300, 400, 500 views means that everybody has sat through the entire video. Probably most people have switched off after 2 minutes or something, but that's not why I do these videos. I love the fact that you do watch them, and I love the fact that you comment, but I'm obviously quite happy talking to myself initially about stitching, and I don't really know what that says about me, but there you go. So again, any questions you've got on any of the threads I've talked about, where you want to know more about them, or I've missed out some vital piece of information that you want to know about them, just comment, let me know, and I of course will get back to you. So all that's left to say now is thank you for watching and happy stitching.